Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
We've been covering the ousting of the U.S. Attorney in New York, and we are joined by a former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. David Kelly led that office, a position once also held by Rudy Giuliani, James Comey, Preet Bharara. You see David up there in the middle of the screen, as well as now on the lower right, Geoff Berman, who, like David, is a former U.S. Attorney for SDNY. I should also mention, in full disclosure, my former boss in law. Good to see you, sir.
Nice to see you, Ari.
We have discussed this office and Mr. Berman before. We discussed the ousting of Preet Bharara, and here we are again discussing this regarding to Mr. Berman. First, have you had any communication with him recently?
I have not since this happened, no.
When's the last time you did have communication?
Oh, I don't know. Sometime in the last, probably right before the pandemic.
Yeah. So you guys talk, you know him, and I hope you don't mind me starting the interview out like a deposition. That's what you taught me, you know.
It's been good. I haven't been in a deposition lately, but so fire away.
So, unlike most Americans, you do have contact with Mr. Berman. You do know how this works, and you ran that office. So, number one, on the scale of 0, totally normal, to 10, a scandal that's off the level, how do you view what's happened based on the public information?
I'd go somewhere between 10 and 12. Look, I think the best case scenario for DOJ is to say that this looks really bad. The worst case scenario is exactly what it looks like, which is trying to subvert the independence of the Southern District.
Wow. That's big. I mean, as you know, there are times where tie goes to the runner, presidents pick their team, but so much has gone down with this office. Do you think there are cases, publicly known or not, that were in the minds of Barr or Trump on this move? Because that would look like meddling, or as John Bolton put it, a former Trump aide, I'm not quoting the resistance here, a potential, quote, obstruction of justice.
Yeah, look, I think I was kind of with Matt from the last segment, which is to say, I'd be surprised if it was directed at any particular case. I just think that at this juncture, the fact that they have someone in there who's independent is not what they want. They would rather have somebody who is more beholden to the administration, somebody they can keep an eye on. And that's why, for example, they were initially planning to put in the U.S. Attorney from New Jersey as the acting, which is mind-boggling, but not because there's anything wrong with the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. It would have been unprecedented to have somebody come in from another office to run the Southern District, particularly under these circumstances.
So you are joining some of the other experts who said that there are tells here, that even if you try to take a benign reading of it, the fact that there was a clash over the accuracy of what Barr's initial plan was, the fact that rather than putting any qualified person in, including the deputy, they said, oh, we'll take a person from another busy office and double their workload. That tells us what, in your view?
If I were to say it was handled ham-handedly, I might be given a compliment under these circumstances.
And what does that tell you about Bill Barr at this point?
Look, I'm not quite sure what. I mean, this is just one in a series of, the continuum where I think by most former federal prosecutors that the Justice Department has become politicized, that it is not untouchable from the executive branch as it once was, and that's a sad day.
Understood. And I know that means a lot for you because you've served, as many of your colleagues have, in both parties. You're not about coming around and picking fights with a particular attorney general. Final question to you, Giuliani responding. Let's see what he's saying. Quote, if they're investigating me, they're doing it in the most surreptitious way possible, the strangest investigation I've ever heard of. And he basically suggested, I'm upset they're giving away this information. He says, quote, I have nothing against Berman, but I'd like him to clarify what the hell is going on. Giuliani feeling, I guess, that perhaps Berman, if there was a probe touching Giuliani, we know his former associates were indicted, that Berman was doing something potentially wrong there.
I don't know what he's pointing to that Berman's doing wrong. It wasn't Jeff Berman who was coming out and talking about the Giuliani investigation. It was others who were speculating that that's the reason why the Attorney General came in and made the move that he did. So I don't think there's anything there. And, I'm not quite sure what we can take from what Mr. Giuliani says about anything these days.
Understood. And finally, I'll mention to viewers, you also have a role as representing another former SDNY chief, James Comey. There has been a lot of noise out of DOJ about those issues, which I think take on perhaps a different cast, seeing how this is going, and whether any retread of the Russia probe or other things are going to happen. Are they going to happen by November? What's your view on all of that? Or is the quiet on that suggest that there's no there?
Well, certainly, look, by many accounts, John Durham is actively underway. What exactly he's doing is a lot of people are guessing, but it's kind of, you had the Inspector General look at this and say that people acted appropriately. You've had Senate committee come out and did an extensive investigation, say no one did anything wrong, and what the Justice Department is going to go in and find that those others did not remains to be seen. But you do have to kind of wonder what the motive is. And, Mr. Giuliani was talking a minute ago about Berman releasing details about the investigation of Giuliani. But frankly, if you really want to talk about those standards, you look at what the Attorney General has been saying about Durham's investigation and the suggestion about the indictment of or the people who are, very familiar, who are going to have a problem when this investigation concludes. So, it's troubling.
It is Tuesday, the 23rd of June of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Yes, well, we have quite a day ahead of us. It is Tuesday, of course, and you would think it's unlike any other day of the week with all that comes down every day of the week. But, well, we got a indictment out of the Southern District of New York. Charges. The first one brought by Berman's replacement. Isn't that interesting? And what is it? It's going after that military guy who gave up some information to some white supremacist neo-Nazi KKK groups to, attack a military base and exact mass casualties. And I guess they're going to blame it on black people. I guess. Or maybe they're just going to take credit for itself. And because that's what they do, back in the day, it used to be, we'll just, hijack a Brinks truck. But I guess with COVID going on, the Brinks trucks aren't really delivering cash to stores as much now, are they? Yeah. So I made the usual suspects here out in Southern Oregon on these Southern Oregon Facebook pages. The ones who seem to populate these Southern Oregon Facebook pages with their right-wing neo-Nazi KKK fascist propaganda. Or at least apologies, at least. So no response about this this guy trying to commit a terrorist act in the name of white power. Because according to them, there is no such thing as like racism in America. It's all an exaggeration by a bunch of whiners. God, the only people whining, this is what gets me. The only people whining are these right-wing repugs. They just whine about people having too many rights, too many people voting. Oh, whine. Why do they have to do this? No one pays their fair share. Well, yes, no free lunch. And everybody on the repug side wants a free lunch. Jeez. No, what? It is a party of whiners. But, of course, if you're whining, you're going to project all of your bad angels onto other people so you don't have to take credit for your bad angels. So we now have a political system in which it's like high school forever. This is how politics are run in high school. I'm not talking in the cafeteria. I'm talking in student government. Oh, my God. Well, it hasn't just become this. It became this long ago, this high school meme. Probably around the time when the teenager first came to prominence. Yeah, that's around World War II, a little bit after. Before that, look it up, kids. Yeah, teenager, you didn't exist. You were a kid, then you're an adult. Teenager, what is that? Yeah, you should feel lucky that you're a teen. Speaking of which, this idea that the kids on TikTok and others manipulated this rally in Tulsa so that, well, Trump had, 6,100? People say 6,200. It was more like 61,136. 6,136 is what I'm trying to say, and that ain't much in a 19,000-seat capacity auditorium. Anyway, Trump is very unhappy, and just as an aside, I think Pascal, he's thinking about maybe quitting, which means that he's getting his ass fired, which is good because I guess they're going to have to train somebody else. Cambridge Analytica did a pretty good job with Brad. Now they're going to have to train someone else. I guess probably Brad had an assistant there. That's usually how it's set up. Someone that will just take right over, clamber up the ladder right over your shoulders to a higher rung, indeed. Well, I'm sure. But there is still some question whether the kids actually did manipulate and punk Trump over this. Possibly. But there's also a concern that if they did, read Digby's column today. She gives some examples of, or maybe it was Spacco, whoever leads off in the morning. Maybe it was Spacco. Going into the TikTok world, and yeah, these kids are not sophisticated, and they don't know diddly. And apparently, Pizzagate is the number one trending thing on TikTok, and the kids believe that Hillary Clinton and Podesta are eating children in the basement of Comet Pizza. And apparently, it's more virulent, this Pizzagate conspiracy, now than it was in 2016 when it began. So is this what we want? Who's going to weaponize what the TikTok kids did in Tulsa? Yeah, and is that what we want? Okay. We better move fast on our feet and move with the times and expect that really societies are always more immature than the technologies handed them. And look what they do with the technologies handed them. They, turn them into a teenage game. Just remember, teens didn't really exist until around World War II. Why? Because they weren't measured. Damn, if you just don't measure things, they won't exist. Every quantum mechanic knows that. Well, there's also an argument in quantum mechanics that says that you don't need to measure something for it to exist. And I would say, you know what? That sounds like common sense to me now, doesn't it? Well, much more going on in the world. We do have a full show for you today. And I guess we could talk about Maggie Haberman or the New York Times. Yeah, they're right on cue. Right on cue. They're like talking about how Biden is a damaged cat. What is their term again? I can't remember exactly what it is. He's troublesome, damaged. What? He did this to Hillary, and I guess he did it to Bill too. Who knows what the deal is? Well, we know what the deal is. Okay, it's the paper of record, and they tend to wreck everything. So, going after Joe. Joe's part of Biden is also, I should just mention, in the fever swamps of conspiracy-minded. Joe's a pedo also, apparently. Now think of it. Here's a guy who lost his wife and daughter in a car accident, and he raised his 2 sons alone. And he took a commuter train every day from D.C. home. He didn't wait till the weekends, because he didn't want to disrupt his kids' schooling. He didn't want to disrupt their lives. He wanted them to have some sort of stability. And he worked hard, and he was a good man. And then you have Donald Trump, spoiled rich boy, habitates. He'd hang out at Studio 54, yeah, with all his lasciviousness. Never, ever did any kind of public service. In fact, he put into not the prenup, but part of the divorce agreement that if Tiffany ever joined the Peace Corps or the military, she would be disinherited. That's how Donald Trump thinks about public service in America. So, we got that going for us, which is nice, obviously. So, then just something came over the transom, not just over the transom, other than the fact that Trump has issued an edict that anybody trying to create an autonomous zone in D.C. will be met with force. Because some people wanted to pull down that racist Andrew Jackson. He's a genocidal maniac. Andrew Jackson tried to pull down his statue. And they were met with force last night, so Trump decided to make an edict. He can't arrest people. He's not a dictator yet. He acts like it, and Barr's propping him up like one, but not yet. Please. Can we wait until the election before you announce that you're a full dictator now? Because I hope you do it behind bars. You can dictate there to a secretary, maybe. I don't know. Will they give you one? Probably. That's how it works. So, no autonomous zones in D.C. I thought D.C. was already an autonomous zone. They won't let it become a state. Okay, semi-autonomous then. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, at the top, that was Ari, and they were speaking about how Berman was replaced, not so much by Barr and Trump to, over a particular case, though that might be argued that it could be a few particular cases, but mostly by former SDNY head Kelly. Mostly they fired Berman, and so they could replace him with someone that they can keep an eye on, because Berman's a little too independent for their tastes. On the rest of the menu, NASCAR rallied around Bubba Wallace, unlike the NFL around Colin Kaepernick, as the FBI investigated a noose hung in the garage stall of the Cup Series only black driver. Well, they didn't do it because he was black. He did it because he was the leading person getting rid of the Dixie swastika at NASCAR events. And he just happened to be black. People weren't doing it because he was black. They were doing it for states' rights. Come on. 8 black officers sued for discrimination over being barred from guarding George Floyd murderer Derek Chauvin because of their race. Really? And fired U.S. Attorney Geoffrey Berman refused to sign on to a Barr-crafted letter critical of the New York City COVID restrictions on religious gatherings. Well, maybe he was fired over that, or maybe that was just one reason. I think it was one reason. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where New Zealand seized $90 million U.S. in assets of a major Russian cybercrime suspect. And construction of Austria's first public monument, naming all the country's Holocaust victims, has finally begun. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Thank you to those of you who have, because your recurring contributions has allowed us to pay our bills. Of course, you know, we dig deep into our own wallets to keep this concern of resistance resisting. And you'll be reminded again, I'm sorry, but you will be, that we are unable to do this without you. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink sent to us once a month, you know the funds, we can stretch those dollars and pay our bills, fly under the radar, resist, as the founders originally intended that we should do, and we're doing it. And we're doing it because of you. And to be honest, we could use more of you. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's so simple. You just go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of @JusticePutnam on Twitter. And you could follow me there, and you might want to, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media, which, of course, we know Twitter is part of. And the show notes and links diary is an integral part of this multimedia operation. We draw it all in. And so the actual sources for the stories that I am riffing on are right there, so you can match and compare. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Don't forget to pick up the Justice Department Musique Sans Frontières, also on Spreaker, broadcast Sunday nights, and then available on Spreaker right after. So check it out. It's music for the pandemic and civil unrest. It really does calm the soul. And maybe makes you get up and want to pad the soles of the bottom of your feet and get out there and do some work. Well, enough of that. Let's get into our first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it's out of the Associated Press by Jenna Fryer. Bubba Wallace steered the number 43 to the front of pit road. NASCAR champion Kyle Busch pushing the famous car on one side and close friend Ryan Blaney pushing on the other. They weren't using cars. They were actually out on their feet, pushing with their hands. Then the entire 40-driver field and their crew members followed. After the car came to a stop, Wallace climbed out, sat on the window ledge, and sobbed. Richard Petty, his Hall of Fame team owner, you know, the guy who used to drive 43 for decades. Oh, you don't know? Yeah, he did. You watch NASCAR, everybody has. Well, he gently placed a hand on Wallace's shoulder. As federal authorities descended on Talladega Superspeedway yesterday, Monday, to investigate the discovery of a noose in Wallace's garage stall, the entire industry rallied around the Cup Series' only black driver. Well, I guess maybe because there's too many black people playing in the NFL, they couldn't rally around Colin Kaepernick then, could they? The news has disturbed us all, and of course we want justice and to know who and why, said 7-time NASCAR champion Jimmy Johnson. And we want to stand with our friend. The 82-year-old Petty at his first race since the pandemic began, and at Talladega on race day for the first time in more than 10 years, stood side by side with Wallace during the national anthem before yesterday's rain-postponed event. Everyone stood behind the car while Brad Keselowski held the American flag at the front of the display, or in a display of solidarity. The idea to stand with Wallace started with Johnson, while former series champion Kevin Harvick suggested they all push the car to the front of the grid, Wallace said. One by one after the anthem, they hugged Wallace. He then had a long embrace with Petty, and then he went racing. Raced out of the money, ran out of gas, unfortunately. That's how racing is. But a change has been made, and now Bubba Wallace will be paying the price. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. 8 minority corrections officers who work at the jail, holding a former Minneapolis police officer charged with murder in the death of George Floyd, allege they were barred from guarding or having contact with the officer because of their race. Floyd died on May 25th after Derek Chauvin, who was white, used his knee to pin down the handcuffed black man's neck, even after Floyd stopped moving and pleading for air. Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. He is being held at the Ramsey County Jail on $1 million bond. 8 Ramsey County correction officers filed racial discrimination charges with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, alleging that when Chauvin was booked into the jail, all officers of color were ordered to a separate floor, according to the Star Tribune, which obtained a copy of the charges. The charges allege that a supervisor told one of the officers that because of their race, they would be a potential, quote, liability around Chauvin. Oh, you know, because all black people want to kill white people in their sleep, especially when they're in jail. And especially if they're a cop. And especially if they're a white cop. And then I was told by racist apologists there's no racist cops in copdom. Because if there were, there would be more blacks being killed by racist cops. And the numbers don't show it, so they don't exist. Really now. Bonnie Smith, a Minneapolis attorney representing the 8 employees, said the order left a lasting impact on morale. I think they deserve to have employment decisions based on performance and behavior, she said. Their main goal is to make sure this never happens again. Jail Superintendent Steve Leiden allegedly told superiors that he was informed that day that Chauvin would be arriving in 10 minutes, and he made a call, quote, to protect and support minority employees by shielding them from Chauvin. Oh, really? Out of care and concern, and without the comfort of time, I made a decision to limit exposure to employees of color to a murder suspect who could potentially aggravate those feelings because they're black. They're not professional policemen, they're black. And he said that in a statement given during an internal investigation and provided by the sheriff's office to the Star Tribune. He has since been demoted. Colleen Long, Michael Balsamo, and Eric Tucker of the AP bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A day before Geoffrey Berman was axed from his job as head of the US Attorney's Office in Manhattan, he refused to sign on to a letter crafted by senior officials in Washington, oh, you mean Bill Barr, lambasting New York's mayor for putting COVID-19 restrictions on religious gatherings because that's what Trump wanted. Berman's refusal didn't directly contribute to his ouster, but it was another example of the ways in which he appeared to run afoul of William Barr and other high-ranking officials at the Justice Department and, of course, the Oval Office. According to several people familiar with their relationship, Berman, a political donor to Trump who investigated and charged some of his allies, was not a team player. He operated outside Washington leadership and won praise from Trump critics as an independent thinker, and he had refused to even alert Washington to cases his high-profile department was working on. Well, of course, because he's not supposed to, and the people were not authorized to speak publicly who spoke to the AP. Now, as a result, Berman's job often appeared to be in jeopardy. He was never formally nominated to the post by Trump, despite having been personally interviewed for the job by Trump. Instead, he was installed by a federal court. As this year wore on, in the wake of the prosecution of Giuliani associates and the probe of the former mayor, his allies in the prosecutor's office were surprised each time Berman returned from Washington with his job intact. The most surprising thing is that he held on as long as he has, said Dania Perry, a former Manhattan federal prosecutor who represented California lawyer Michael Avenatti in his recent fraud trial case, which was won by Berman's prosecutor office, by the way. The tensions between Berman and the Justice Department reached a breaking point on Friday when Barr issued a surprise press release saying Berman had resigned and would be replaced by Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Jay Clayton, a lawyer who has virtually no experience as a federal prosecutor, but he must be a team player. Must be. Berman refused to step down and went into work on Saturday. He eventually consented to leave after Barr said Trump had officially fired him, and the second in command of the office would take over. Of course, Trump said, that's Barr's thing. I didn't have nothing to do with it. Coffee boy? Somebody's a coffee boy here. One of Berman's final acts was to refuse to sign on to a letter criticizing New York Mayor Bill de Blasio for allowing massive police reform protests, even though he had cracked down in April on a group of thousands of mourners at a funeral for a Hasidic leader whose death was linked to the coronavirus. Now, the Hasidim are an insular, ultra-Orthodox Jewish sect in Brooklyn, and it is a powerful voting bloc that favored Trump in 2016, and Trump needs every help he can get, every little bit. The message to the public from New York City's government appears to favor certain secular gatherings and disfavor religious ones. What? That was Assistant AG Eric Dreiband, or is it Dreiband? Ensuring religious liberty has been a top priority for Barr, whose office has weighed in on several lawsuits around the country seeking to reopen religious gatherings during the pandemic. The Justice Department sent separate letters last month to the governors of Nevada and California, warning that religious gatherings should be held to the same standard as similar secular gatherings when it comes to pandemic-related public health orders. Then the letter sent to California Governor Gavin Newsom was signed by all 4 U.S. attorneys in the state. The final straw for Berman, though, remains murky. Justice Department officials insisted the de Blasio letter played no role, and Barr didn't know about Berman's refusal to sign it when he sent out the statement. They said Berman was offered other positions, including running the Justice Department's Civil Division, but declined them. New Yorkers close to Berman were mystified, especially because the probe into Giuliani is ongoing and no indictments were imminent. But he's not a team player, and they need to keep an eye on whoever is. Well, that brings us to our break, and we will go to our break now. And when we get back, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Julia Rosen.
Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Thanks, Mr. Narwhal.
In real life, narwhals don't speak English, like the one bidding farewell to Will Ferrell's character in the movie Elf. Instead, they sound more like this. That's an audio clip recorded by scientists last summer under the icy waters of northwest Greenland.
If we want to describe what animals are doing, we first better understand what sounds are telling us.
Yevgeny Podolsky, a geophysicist at Hokkaido University in Japan. Podolsky and his colleagues study the soundscape of glacial fjords. They're noisy places where icebergs crash into the ocean and air bubbles fizz out of melting ice. These fjords are also home to narwhals. The animals are sometimes called unicorns of the sea because of their single, long, spiraled tusk, and they're shy, which makes them hard to study. So Podolsky teamed up with local Inuit hunters who snuck up on narwhals in kayaks and captured audio. That's the sound of a narwhal looking for food using echolocation, like a dolphin or a bat. And that's a narwhal closing in on its prey, which it vacuums up into its toothless mouth.
So it starts sounding like, to my ear, like a chainsaw or something like. So it's so many little clicks that we cannot even distinguish them. And this is recognized as a foraging-related sound used also by other animals. For example, other dolphinoids or bats, they do the same trick because when they approach the target, the prey, which is for narwhals, Arctic cod or Greenland halibut, they want to update their knowledge about the position of the target more frequently because the target is moving and they need to suck it in. And that's why this interval is getting shorter. And we even, by using some simple assumptions in the equation, can know how far the animal is from the target.
The whistles you heard earlier are thought to be social calls, individuals communicating with other narwhals. The researchers reported these observations in the Journal of Geophysical Research, Oceans.
There are still sounds which we don't know what do they mean, and there are several like this.
Podolsky says that listening to narwhals is a first step toward understanding this mysterious whale and how it will cope as climate change, shipping, and other human activities alter its Arctic home.
There are all these things taking place right now in the region which will affect somehow these animals, but we have no clue even about the state or the previous state of these animals. So if we want to learn what's going to happen, we better start now. And I hope this is where sound monitoring can help us to learn more about these still mysterious creatures.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Julia Rosen.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Recently, at a protest in Buffalo, New York, against the police killing of George Floyd, 2 police officers, without provocation or justification, shoved 75-year-old Martin Gugino backwards. He cracked his head and suffered serious injury. And then the story gets worse.
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The video shows blood seeping from Mr. Gugino's right ear and a phalanx of officers parading past him on the sidewalk, offering him no help or aid. Later, while Mr. Gugino was in the midst of a long hospitalization, apparently having suffered a brain injury, the President of the United States got involved. Trump accused Gugino of staging his fall, faking his injuries, of using fake blood as a prop, of being a violent person and a provocateur, somehow scanning police communications. For these accusations, there is no basis whatsoever. None, no facts. As John Thune, the number 2 Senate Republican, said, that's a serious accusation, which should only be made with facts and evidence. And I haven't seen any yet. What are the ways to fight back against these assaults on our fundamental and precious First Amendment freedoms? We can try to not be intimidated by the government and continue to use our First Amendment rights to videotape, to assemble, to protest, to march, to speak up and speak out.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day that many labor historians mark as the beginning of a long decline of the U.S. labor movement. The United States Congress passed the Taft-Hartley Act. The bill was named after Republican Senator Robert A. Taft from Ohio. The son of President William Howard Taft, the senator had been a staunch opponent of President Roosevelt's New Deal policies. He continued his anti-working class efforts with a new bill aimed to curb the power of unions. He found an ally in Representative Fred Hartley, a Republican congressman from New Jersey. After World War II, a wave of strikes washed over the nation. Most labor unions had agreed not to go on strike during the war, but frustrations over wages and working conditions mounted. In the years after the conflict ended, 5 million workers walked the picket lines. 1 in 4 private sector workers was a union member. Labor was on the march. The congressional Republicans passed the Taft-Hartley Act in response. The bill ushered in limits on the right to strike. It also began the era of so-called right to work, allowing states to pass laws making it more difficult for unions to collect dues and represent workers. The new law also required union leaders to sign affidavits that they were not communists, bringing the Red Scare to the House of Labor. A massive rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City asked President Truman to veto the slave labor bill. President Truman did veto the bill, but Congress overrode his veto. Today, only 12% of workers are in unions. 26 states are so-called right-to-work states, to the great detriment of workers' living standards and their health and safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. I'm Mark Boulanger. World economies are not only struggling with the effects of the pandemic, they are also trying to figure out what economic activity will look like in the future. Labor organizations are pushing hard that this new economic activity be green and sustainable. One of the labor organizations at the forefront of the push for green economies is Industrial Global Union. Industrial recently held a webinar on the issue moderated by Communications Officer Walton Pantlin. He spoke to a number of experts on the issue. One was Ken Matsuzaki, who is the head of Industrial's department addressing ICT, electrical, and electronics. Mr. Pantlin.
We're going to talk about green technology and how it can help us to recover from the coronavirus recession and provide quality, sustainable jobs. Green tech can transform our economy, creating a zero-waste circular system that addresses climate change while looking after the needs of workers and communities. Industrial represents 55 million workers around the world in the mining, energy, and manufacturing sectors, and green tech will shape the lives of many of our members over the coming years. Your sector includes companies making computer chips, microprocessors, and other electronic equipment. So what's your perspective?
My sector, ICT, electrical electronic sector, is quite a unique sector, I would say, because ICT is not making product, but they're actually providing programs and also the solution for the green technology, which is heavily related to renewable energy sector. And electrical sector, they are making also, the power generator and wind turbines and also solar power, panels. And also electronic sector, of course, electronic sector is actually producing the electronics equipment to support the growth of the green technology and also renewable energy. And I see this green technology is one of the future for our manufacturing sector and create sustainable job. Here's one example, because since green technology is heavily related to renewable energy sectors, and there's one research saying that renewable energy creates new jobs 12 times faster than any other segment of the economy. And that is 20% of annual growth and a total of 4.5 million jobs in the United States alone. So I think this is a very good point that this research shows that this green technology will definitely have a sustainable future for our industry. And as you know, this COVID-19 crisis, which create the economical turmoil, and which led, the price of the oil and gas, the fossil fuels has gone down. So this is not good news for, when we talk about how we invest renewable energy in the future by using green technology. But I would say we are the trade union movement, we always want sustainable jobs for the future. And also we need to achieve, as Matthias said, sustainable development goals. And we need to create, the decent work in those sectors. So I would say one of the trade union job is that we need concrete industrial policy to motivate our policymakers, all the nations, to aggressively invest in green technology and renewable energy. And that's where we see the future organizing opportunity.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can listen to our features and daily newscasts at radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about caring for each other through global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 64 degrees, slated for a high of nearly the same as yesterday. About 100 to 102 is what we had yesterday. They're saying only 98 today. That's not nearly the same. Though, I suppose, do you really feel the difference between 102 and 98? Now, do you? I do. So, all that stated, we are under an active heat advisory in the region. Sunny today, and I guess that means it will be hot. An abundant sunshine. Hot, abundant sunshine. Highs, once again, about 98 to 102. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour in a few hours. Clear skies tonight, lows in the mid-60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow we'll have sunshine and clouds mixed, and the temps are going to go lower, about 90. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Coronavirus, confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County of Southern Oregon has now increased to 91. Now, this Eastern Oregon church is really further north from us. But a lot of those idiots come on down here to Southern Oregon to, get out of the Northern Oregon parts and come here and bring their diseases with them. I don't know if that's the case, but that church up in Eastern Oregon, northern Eastern Oregon, has almost 240 cases of coronavirus. And they got that because they were following Trump's rules, because they're all Trumpers now. The 30-year-old pastor has been busted for under the influence and possession of methamphetamine and any other slew of charges, because that's what you do when you're in the service of God as a neo-Nazi. Pentecost, apparently. So, confirmed cases at 91. That's nice. Grass pollen right outside the mothership's window is rated very high again. The air quality index in the Southern Oregon region is good, though it's gone up to 39 parts per million. And the daytime UV index remains very high at 9, so take care with that. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.97 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is down to 56%. Rather dry. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 81 and sunny. Wow. Paris, 85 and sunny. I think people are wanting to get out of Paris now. Rome is 91 and sunny, but it's really nice at the Spanish Steps. Don't go there unless you're wearing a mask and you stay 6 feet away from people. Kyiv is 77 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 82 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 75 degrees and fair. Sydney, Australia is 51 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy with a fog advisory. And New York is 85 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, and hot as hell. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees, this time at Reuters, bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. New Zealand police have seized assets worth $90.68 million U.S., linked to a Russian man suspected of laundering billions of dollars in digital currency. The police said it seized the assets because they were being held in a New Zealand company owned by Alexander Vinnick. Oh, that guy. We've heard of him before, who is accused of masterminding a Bitcoin laundering ring and is wanted in both France and the United States. This is the largest restraint of funds in New Zealand police history, the department said. U.S. authorities accuse Vinnick of running BTC-E, a digital currency exchange used to trade Bitcoin to facilitate crimes ranging from computer hacking to drug trafficking since 2011. Vinnick has denied the charges, saying he was just a technical consultant and not the company's operator. He was arrested on money laundering allegations in Greece in 2017 and has since been extradited to France, where he remains in custody. He is also wanted in Russia on lesser charges. New Zealand Police Commissioner Andrew Coster said the funds are likely to reflect profits gained from the victimization of thousands of people globally. New Zealand Police said it worked closely with the U.S. Internal Revenue Service on the case and has applied to the High Court seeking forfeiture of the funds.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Construction of Austria's first public monument naming all the country's Holocaust victims began yesterday, Monday, a further step by Hitler's native land towards confronting an issue it has long struggled with. For decades after World War II, Austria denied responsibility for crimes committed by the Nazis, arguing that it was their first victim, despite the enthusiasm with which many citizens had welcomed annexation by Hitler's Germany in 1938. The country now recognizes that Austrians were perpetrators as well as victims of Nazi crimes, but it has not confronted that chapter of its history as openly or directly as Germany. The new monument, located in a park next to Austria's central bank, will comprise a ring of upright stone slabs around an island of trees and will name all 64,259 Austrian victims of the Holocaust. It is due to be inaugurated in a year's time. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And you do know that Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, pandemic and civil unrest as it may occur. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Roll the tea.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.